Hello, everybody, and welcome to CPSC's sponsored webinar, Data Drives the Fire Service, but You're in the Driver's Seat. Today's presenter is Tom Lewis. Tom currently serves as the Business Development Analyst for Emergency Reporting, a longtime CPSC sponsor and provider of cloud-based fire and EMS records management software to over 6,000 public safety agencies worldwide. Tom retired as a battalion chief from the Green Valley Fire District in Arizona in 2013 after serving for 22 years. He has used emergency reporting since 2004 and has been part of the emergency reporting family since 2011. He teaches throughout the United States and in South Korea, Japan, Germany, Italy, and Kuwait. In addition to serving as a company officer, paramedic, and public information officer, he holds 2 associate degrees and graduated summa cum laude from Arizona State University with a Bachelor of Applied Science degree in Fire Service Management. He is a bit of a data geek and is passionate about sharing the message that in order to tell our story, we need high-quality, actionable data presented to our communities and decision makers in an easily understandable manner. He is an avid reader, obsessed about classic and modern Mopar muscle cars, and has a soft spot for retired racing greyhounds. At the end of the webinar, please contact Emergency Reporting directly for additional information, and be sure to visit their booth at the 2019 Excellence Conference, March 12 through 15 at the Hyatt Regency Orange County in Garden Grove, California. Please welcome Tom as he shares why data drives the fire service, but it's all of you humans in the driver's seat. Tom?
Cindy, thank you for that kind introduction. I appreciate that very much. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy days to join us today for this webinar. We're really happy to have you here, and we want to make this a productive hour for you. And I'm going to share some interesting things. It's not going to be a technical presentation. It's going to be kind of big concepts and opportunities for you to take back to your agencies and just take your data management to the next level. I'm also very honored to be joined by 2 fantastic chiefs, Chief John Greer from Iowa City, Iowa. He's going to share a best practice with all of you later on in the presentation, as will Chief Charles McGarvey out of Lower Merion, Pennsylvania. And the accreditation manager for Little Rock Fire, Bo Hagar, also has a best practice. So we want to show some real-world examples amidst some of these concepts that we're going to share today. You can put questions, ask questions in this webinar. And we also have 3 handouts. If you look at your GoToMeeting control panel, there are 3 handouts. One of them is the slide deck for today's presentation, so no peeking until we're done. The white paper that we put together at Emergency Reporting about this topic. And then we have the best practice example that we'll talk about later from Chief McGarvey's department, their 2017 annual report. So without further ado, let's get started. To get going, I'd like to dedicate this presentation to Chief Brunacini. I know many of you know the former fire chief of the Phoenix Fire Department for many years. He was a mentor to me, even just remotely. I didn't have the privilege of actually working under him, but I was able to talk with him multiple times during my career, and he was kind of a guiding light for me on how I wanted to be as an officer in my fire department. And we also were very privileged to have him speak at our inaugural National Training Academy on September 25th of 2017. And he and I talked about the presentation that he would give, and the topic was, and we worked together on this, knowing his personality and how his focus on the troops, on Mrs. Smith. And we talked, well, what about, and he's not a techie, so we talked about, well, why don't we call, Data's driving the fire service now, but let's say, it's humans, it's you in the driver's seat. And then he just went and did an amazing presentation that, of course, kept everybody in rapt attention. And so I just like to carry on some of those concepts that he shared with us and explain some things that if you weren't able to attend this presentation, some of it will be in my presentation. So I wanted to acknowledge his contribution, one of the countless things he did for all of us in the fire service. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to ask, is data management an organizational value within your organization, and kind of what that looks like. We want to eliminate the disconnect, because a lot of you have heard garbage in, garbage out. I like to say good stuff in, good stuff out. And a lot of it comes down to the element of what's being put into your systems. You probably have in your organizations your CPSI accreditation managers, your go-to people when it comes to fixing the tough books, or the techies that are your go-to people. But what about the rest of the organization? Do they understand the whys when it comes to putting in good quality data? And we run into that a lot in the fire service, where we want to take the path of least resistance. We're firefighters, and I can say this because I was one for many years. And so when it comes time to doing this data entry, if we can get it in and out quickly and still get it done, we're happy. But was it done right? And so we'll chat a little bit about that. And then pulling that information out so you can tell your story to your communities very effectively. And we can get mired in spreadsheets, but at the end of the day, how do we translate those spreadsheets, that volume of data, into actionable information for your decision makers, your board members, city council members, and so forth, and for the chief officers of the organization? So we always hear the devil's in the details. Well, I think the angel's in these details. So we'll talk a little bit about what exactly is good data, why it matters. Again, that whole concept of telling your story, and then I want to share with you. It's not going to be revolutionary. You probably understand this and do it in some form, but this bottom-up mindset when it comes to having data management as an organizational value. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we've got Chief McGarvey, Chief Greer, and Bo Hager from Little Rock that will share some of their best practices, which I think you'll find fascinating. Okay, so is data an organizational value? So we know the fire triangle, right? The oxygen, fuel, heat. Of course, we know it's a tetrahedron because of the chemical chain reaction, but bear with me here. Going with what Chief Brunasini had talked about, he listed hardware, software, and liveware when it comes to data management in a fire service organization. And so let's take this into the triangle concept. So any one of these, if it's missing, of course, you're not going to have a very good data management aspect of your organization, nor can we consider it a value if any one of these three are missing. And then chances are all three of these are present in your organization, but just how strong is each of the sides? And so looking at that, doing some introspection on your hardware, your software, and liveware, how do they all come together to help you get your job done? So hardware, it's a tool, just like anything else we purchase in the fire service, whether it's power equipment, extrication equipment, trucks. It's not a multi-million-dollar purchase typically, like a truck would be, or hundreds of thousands of dollars for a truck, but it is an essential part, and it is a tool that is used every day. So is it available when and where you need it? So are you running machines, tough books that are the latest version of Windows 98, or are they up to date running the latest, most secure software? Are they being maintained? How is that structured in your organization for the maintenance of the hardware, the stuff? Do you have key personnel that are your local subject matter experts that go in, and they may be firefighters that have that gift, that talent to be able to keep things up and running? Are you fortunate enough to be in a municipality where you have dedicated IT staff? How does that work, and how do they prioritize the fire department's IT needs? And we all struggle with that. I remember using tough books in my department and keeping them up and running, and they worked, but they weren't the fastest. And sometimes it gets to where you have to think, do you have a replacement? Do you have a replacement plan? Just like you have a replacement plan for apparatus. How long are these devices going to last us before they become barely usable and lead to frustration? And then with frustration, when we get to the liveware, that frustration leads to maybe not compliance, maybe not as productive, or putting in the quality data that you need. One of the big issues, which I certainly won't get into in detail today, but cybersecurity. Are you running the latest updates? Are you meeting your agencies or your municipalities' requirements for the type of hardware and the latest versions of the operating system or other software that you're using? Vulnerabilities are found in older versions that can be exploited by the bad guys out there, and it takes time and effort to keep everything up to date. And so that's a resource that you'll have to take advantage of both internally and externally if you are an agency, say like a fire district, that may have to contract with the private organizations to help you keep that in place. And arguably, and I'll go with something that Chief Brugnasini mentioned, that despite the challenges of hardware, in the big picture of this triangle, it's relatively easy to manage. Okay, software is the next one. So this is what I know a little bit about. Is it reliable? Again, it's something that's purchased, so it is a tool, even though it's not a hard good. It's easy to use, and it should be if it isn't. And why it's easy to use is because not everyone in your organization is going to have that level of tech savviness. Maybe the youngest generation that are in your department right now, the 20-somethings and the early 30-somethings, they're probably going to be pretty good. But what about that salty seasoned firefighter that just wants to get in, get his report done, and get out? Can he do it and do it well, or is it going to be a complicated process to get that done? It's of course managed, and so like our software, emergency reporting, I've found when I go to different agencies, the most successful organizations that either one can implement software like this relatively quickly and effectively, they identify key personnel. So if you are in an organization where knowledge is power and knowledge hoarded is power, that's going to hurt you in the long run. You got to share it, and you got to be willing to trust and to share, because I found, and I can cite examples like City of Cleveland, some of these other smaller organizations that we've worked with, Tinker Air Force Base, they had the right people in the right spots working in the various modules or components of that software, okay? And so the training officer deep dove into the training part of the system. You've got the person responsible for submitting to NFIRS. They've mastered the incident module. Then you have an overall administrator that can be good enough in all aspects of the system to be a troubleshooter and to manage and administer the entire system, dole out the proper roles and permissions and things like that. So I can't emphasize enough on this software, and again, it's going to lead us into the most important part here momentarily, that take advantage of the people that are interested in it, take advantage of the people that want to jump in, and it's not always going to be based on rank. It may be a firefighter that's just gifted with this, and you'll give them that added responsibility because he's going to help take your organization to that next level. It's a tough thing to do sometimes. I've seen it firsthand throughout my travels, but I think it's an opportunity to really get the most out of your people and to develop that buy-in. Of course, the security aspect of it. So if you have a system that is locally installed, how's it being updated? Is it the latest version? Is it safe? Or do you have a web-based system that you're always in the latest and safest version no matter when or where you log in? Is there an update plan? So if it's an installed solution, is someone managing that update plan? How are those? What's the cost involved? Things like that you have to consider. So the things that the concept I want to present here is sometimes simplification. Handling complicated things may require a turn towards the simplified version and simplified opportunities. So again, with like a web-based software like emergency reporting, it could make your life easier knowing that you don't have to worry about the updating and the cybersecurity elements because that's handled by the vendor. And of course, again, going with hardware, it's a little bit easier to manage than the hard one here, the liveware, the humans. This is Chief Brugnasini's phrase, liveware. I love it. It is the most important side of this triangle, and they do the work. They're managed and led. They're not purchased. They're managed and led. SOGs govern a lot of the behavior, and the one thing that you have to ask are the expectations clear when it comes to, and now we're focused here on data management, but are the expectations clear from the firefighter on up to your battalion chiefs? Usually at that level, they're spending more of their time doing data and working in front of the computer than they are running calls many times. And so at that level, they pretty much get it. But how about down at the entry level, at the truck level? Do they understand what their expectations and roles are when it comes to managing and contributing to the culture of data management in your organization. Training's a key part of it. Just like Don and I always, when I'm teaching our software, I say, you know, the first time it seems disorienting. It seems hard to try and figure out, how am I going to make this all work? Where do I get started? It's like donning an SCBA. When you first started your fire academy, none of us were able to don an SCBA in less than 30 seconds. It took practice. It took that muscle memory. And then once you do it more and more, it becomes kind of a familiar friend. And that's how good software will work with the liveware, with the people. And I always say that the people that love the data will love it even more and love working with it if you've got a good system in place. And those that just want to get in and get out will at least say, you know, it's not so bad. I can get in, get it done right, and get back to what I want to do, taking care of Mrs. Smith, training, running calls. Arguably, I think we'd all agree that they are much harder to manage. It's much more dynamic than the hardware and the software. But each of these three play a key role in the success of your organization. The hardware, the software, and the liveware, and there's decisions to be made at each level. And it's not easy because you've got to think forward, you've got to anticipate the change, and we know, I'm going to tell you, in the fire service, we're used to running calls, taking care of the customer. Sometimes you actually do save lives in structure fires, someone with a low blood sugar, heart attack, and you have that instant gratification and you have a sense of completion and conclusion when you're out there doing the job. One thing I can tell you now that I've moved into software, it's never done. We're constantly changing, constantly evolving. The technology industry is very difficult to keep up with. So hardware, while it changes fast, that doesn't get replaced as frequently. Software, like I said, we're changing every couple weeks, and sometimes more frequently than that. And then of course your people, they're hopefully there for a safe, healthy 20-year career. And so how are they going to be part of this plan to have an effective data management program essentially in your department? And do they understand it? So at the end, looking at that fire triangle, you're either going to have someone like C3PO that you're going to want to work with, that's going to contribute technology in a meaningful way and help you be extremely productive, even if they're a little nagging and annoying sometimes, or you're going to wind up with the T1000 and it's going to make your life miserable and be a nuisance that keeps saying, these problems, I'll be back. So the next part I'd like to present, and before we do that, let me just pause and see if we've got any questions. Okay, no questions so far. Excellent. Okay, so the next concept I want to present is the elimination of the disconnect. So the disconnect can happen where those putting the information in don't understand the why behind what they're doing. They just know it's, oh, I just have to do this. You know, chief wants this data, wants these numbers, run times, turnout times. All right, so that's going to be part of the foundation for my bottom-up theory that I'll present to you at the end of the presentation today. And then you've got the analysis of that data. So the quality, how you're going to analyze it, and then prepare for putting good information out and presenting it to the decision makers in a way that they can use it. If you give me a CSV file of all these incidents and all these times, yeah, maybe I can make some sense out of it, but those that are making the decisions, they need it in a format that's going to allow them to understand it clearly and, quite honestly, without having to put heavy thinking into it amidst all of their other responsibilities. And then at the end, you're going to get happy chiefs and you're going to have effective decision making. So I kind of go with what Chief Brunacini has said when he talks about the customer service and incident management and incident safety. The way he always explained it was deceptively simple in explaining it, but in executing it, it's very challenging. And I think a little bit of this eliminating the disconnect can be challenging in a lot of ways because there's a lot of pieces here and a lot of elements, of which, of course, are those three parts of the fire data triangle. But even within each side, there's a lot of elements to manage. So good data in. The question to ask yourselves is, does the liveware, do the people know why? I always found that when I was a firefighter and moving up the ranks, when even a little piece of the why was shared with me, it took on a different meaning for me when I did my job in whatever aspect of it. And in this case, with data management, linking it to funding, linking it to a tax rate, linking it to grants, may provide a little different perspective, even if it's just planting that seed that, you know, what you're doing here matters. The documentation of your PPE checks, the documentation of your truck checks, all of this matters when we go to replacing it. If there's an injury or, God forbid, a line of duty death, do we have good documentation so that your family could be taken care of in the event that there's a challenge towards you know, a turnout failure or something like that? Do you have good documentation? So that's saying if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Well, if it isn't written down, how are you going to go back and make your case, whether it's for a budget, for a grant, or for compensation due to an injury? And so a little bit of that why and sharing of examples that may not even be from your department. My department had a ladder truck failure back in the mid-2000s, and our truck check was done in paper. And we know how that goes. You check the boxes, puts it in a 3-ring binder. When the week's over, you send it away to a filing cabinet at headquarters. Well, coffee stains, grease stains, we run a call, boxes don't get checked. So looking at that historically, not only do you not have a tool to be able to track it and run reports on it, then when the lawyers and investigation takes place, they're going to look at that and they're going to question, because of the quality of that data, even though it's analog, the quality of that data, was this truck being checked? And you know it has been. You know your guys are checking the trucks. But the documentation aspect of it, through no fault of their own, wasn't indifference. It's just things get busy and things get forgotten and submitted and go missing. So when you're transitioning, especially if you're going to transition from, say, and I'm pretty sure most everybody on today's presentation, they're not using paper anymore. But if you are, or if you're using a system that's challenging to use, how do you take it to that next level? So you're going to be able to explain the whys and then make good decisions afterwards. And so putting that data in requires training. And just like we train to tear apart a car in an extrication class, or the proper techniques for modern ventilation, this is another element that you just got to fit in to all of our routine and the busyness of being in the fire service these days to explain how and why you put the data in to whatever system you're using, okay? The next step, again, in this 4-step process is you're going to have the analysis of that data, all right? And part of that analysis will come with the software. You know, it may be your red light, green light process where you know that you've got at least an NFIRS or NEMSIS compliant incident report, or that you've covered all of the key fields for a training report. But at the end, you still want, and I believe you still need, humans to perform some level of QA. I know some agencies, they allow the report writer to complete a report, and then they go through every incident to make sure it meets the agency standards. And a lot of that standard, sure, will be an NFIRS, for example, or, you know, the training codes for a training class, or a completion of an inspection form for an occupancy inspection. All right, but that last set of eyes, checking out narratives, things that technology can do, but not necessarily as well as humans, to ensure it meets your agency's expectations, and then communicating it when it doesn't. You probably have been in the same seat I've been in, where I'm going through doing some reviews of reports, whether it's incidents or whatnot, and it's often just quicker for me to correct it than to send an email or use the software to send out a notification to that report writer to correct it. But I just did myself and that person and the organization a tremendous, you know, a tremendous disservice, because not only does that person not know what they need to correct so they don't do it again, the organization doesn't get better for it. I might know what needs to get done, but what about the person writing it? So then they go in and correct it. So sometimes it does take that, okay, one extra step that, yeah, it's easier if I just do it, but we're all going to be better if this person that actually wrote that report goes in and corrects it so it meets my organizational standards. And in the end, you're going to tell your story. So good data in, effective analysis, and then that ability to present it. And later on, we're going to show you a way that Chief McGarvey at Lower Merion Fire Department in Pennsylvania has done this. Just one example. Those of you, if any of you are from the United States Marine Corps Fire Department, your annual report for all your agencies is absolutely a beautiful document. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, check with your chief and take a look at it. It is one of the finest, again, like Chief McGarvey's, just one of the finest presentations on telling your story and knowing your audience. And I didn't put that in here, but know your audience too, because sometimes the city council, they're going to want more analytics, more numbers. Okay, the community, they'll want some numbers, but they're also going to want to have that feel-good component, that what you're doing and some anecdotal examples of it. All right, it's amazing how pets being saved in firefighters seem to just consume a huge amount of media and goodwill for the fire department. It's those kind of examples. And I want to thank Paul Combs. I did reach out to him to get his permission to share this. And again, no matter where we work in our organizations, whether we're a DoD agency, whether we are a fire district, a municipality, even a private fire organization, a lot of what we have to do is to justify and verify our budgets. That's a phrase from Ronnie Coleman. And then another one I've learned along the way, I've been very blessed to have a lot of mentors during my time with emergency reporting, and we're pretty good in the fire service of we pilfer, plagiarize, and perfect. And there was no perfecting here. These are just great tips that I picked up along the way. But Chief Coleman would always say, you know, this data analysis, collection, analysis, and presentation used to justify and verify your budgets. And then one of my favorite people in the whole world, Chief John Erickson, retired Army fire chief, talks about the 3 M's: money, manning, and machinery. In the end, those are the 3 things you got to keep your department running. And so all of this data management will allow us to hopefully keep up with the cops, because they seem to get all the funds. But remember, in their academies, they're taught documentation. They're taught the value of data, whether it's in the written form in their reports or just documenting their investigations. In our fire academy, did anybody in their fire academy have a data management or an NFIRS component to their fire academy? I've been to some larger departments and they struggle with even NFIRS, and it's no fault of their own. They just haven't had that exposure, and so the data going in hasn't even been documented. Some agencies would only document fire calls for years and not even their EMS calls until they transition to another system. And so where did all that data, all that you did for the community, where did it go? Okay, so the details. The angel's there. Forget the devil. We're kicking them out. All right, so what is good data? What does that really mean? So ISO 9000, 2015, a very sophisticated, complicated document that talks about all of this. I did my best looking at what was out there, and I think I was able to distill it down to 6 components that I think are very relevant to what defines good data and where the angel's at in the details. So completeness, let's go there real quick. So when we talk about completeness, is it comprehensive? Are the required elements, are they missing or they're completed? So like here underneath PCR, we know NEMSIS wants gender, all right? A lot of times your software is going to take care of this and let you know and not let you finish that report in the red light, green light concept here, a warning symbol. Okay, I'm missing something on patient info, but all my other ones are looking good. And again, does the software help the liveware? Because some of this stuff, those of you that report EMS, NFIRS can be tough enough, but it's still a solid national standard, which certainly has some opportunities to be enhanced. However, an NEMSIS is different state by state, and ensuring that you have a valid report can be challenging. How about your training records? Does your software help you track that? Track certifications. Let you know when you're due for recertifying your EMT or your medic cert. Okay, this is where the completeness goes hand in hand. Some of the more mundane, I'd argue boring stuff of a complete report, software will handle. But remember, completeness also involves these narratives And that concept of if it wasn't written, it didn't happen, and that's an element of completeness here. And that still requires your people to look this stuff over. Accuracy. So the definition I found about accuracy is, does it reflect reality? In other words, are those fields, are they capturing what they're supposed to capture? Spelling actually does count. I know a lot of people rely on the spell checkers, but it's a bit of a lost art. What if you turned off your spell checker? How good would your reports be? Okay, not that you're going to do that, but we should still be aware of how spelling matters. In fact, I have to joke because there was a change made to our white paper. The title had humans with an apostrophe S, and I don't know about you guys, but unless it's possessive, the apostrophe should never be there. And so it's like, how did that get there? And so we scrambled to make the change and little things like that. And again, same with your data. And remember, this accuracy, the decision makers, they're going to be looking at this. All right, can they trust this data? Does it reflect the reality of what your department is doing? Who or what defines accuracy? Whoops, let's go back. Who or what defines accuracy? So again, software will help you, but it's up to you as an agency to define, okay, what is accurate? All right, is the CAD sending the data? Can I trust that? Yeah, I can trust that. So those numbers are going to be good. So again, there's no such thing as a paperless department, and there's never going to be a department where you're going to let the machines or the computers do all of this. You're still going to be knee deep into it, and it's going to start taking up more and more of our time. Consistency, your ducks in a row. Will similar incidents look similar? So for example, are they putting in NFIRS code 100 for a structure fire, or are they actually using 111? And who's checking that? Because you can get a completed report and a valid report by putting in the wrong NFIRS incident type. And who communicates why? Why should we be using a 321 versus a 300? How about your drills and training? So documenting that. And again, if I do an 1 3/4 attack with supply drill with my crew, will I document that the same way as B shift is going to document it? We want to talk about B shifters. I was a C shifter. But will they document it the same? Will they document it the same way? Same type of drill, same SOG, same minimum company standard, but will it be documented in the same way? And do you have the tools in place to help ensure that so you can quantify and have quality data? And then really, how do you define consistency? So when I say how do you define it, what is consistent? What are those expectations? And are those expectations communicated throughout the organization? And it's all done by examples. And again, you know, we have templates in our training module to ensure that I can go out and do a drill, and because there's a template there, I'm done in 30 seconds. All I have to do is put my crew in, all the training codes are there, and it's good to go. Anything that you can do to make their jobs easier with whatever tool are provided via the software or the hardware is going to get that better consistency. And it's a big deal. It's a really big deal because those numbers can start adding up, and if it's all disparate and not consistent, then you're not going to be able to tell your story as boldly as you could if everything was consistent. So validity, does it capture, measure, and track what it's supposed to? This again, we can go to the NFIRS and NEMSIS component. So those different fields, is it actually capturing the actions taken? All right. Does it truly explain what we did and being able to document it? Can you trust, can you trust that data? And so when I say trust the data, all right, do you know that whatever you've put in coming out is, yeah, that not only looks right, it makes sense. And despite all of this analysis and the details here, you kind of know. Example I give you, there's reports in our system that allow you to know, okay, where are we taking our patients? Which hospitals are our common destination? You know in your gut and just from experience, okay, yeah, I know it's, University Medical Center, that's where we always go. But now you've got these facts to back up your hunches. And it's going to be those facts that get decisions made, not just hunches and not just, anecdotes. It's got to be kind of hard, cold facts to back up the warm, fuzzy needs that you're going to have for your organization and to convince those decision makers. Okay, so availability. Think software, hardware. Is it available to users and to decision makers? Can they get in and get what they need done and done effectively, okay, wherever they're at? Obviously, web-based, you got an internet-connected device, you can get in and knock out reports from home if you need to. Can the decision makers extract what they need out of it? And then this here service level agreements goes back to both hardware and software. Do you know what your provider will give you if you need help? So when you have to call 911 for your records management system or for your hardware, do you know what the expectations are? In other words, what service level agreements mean is that if it's a priority 1, we're responding to you within 4 hours. Okay? If it's a priority 2, we've got 8 hours. Or if it's a priority 3, you'll get a response back within 24 hours. You should have those expectations. Think that's our response times. That's our response times, just like you have to measure your various response times from alarm processing to turnout to travel times. Okay? Same thing with what we call service level agreements. Ask your providers of hardware and software what those service level agreements are. They may be buried in the fine print of your contracts. And then the backup of your data. So what happens if everything's stored on one server and it goes down? What's going to happen? And then it has happened. Or what if it's dependent on updates and those updates haven't taken place? What happens to the data? These are all questions that need to be asked. We get asked a lot of hard questions when it comes to this. You know, I want my data, and what happens if, you know, the internet goes down? Well, where does it go down? Is it our servers that go down when we have a 99.9 uptime, or is it your local internet that goes down? Because nothing's more frustrating than cable modem that fails or a wireless, you know, router that fails at the station when you've got 10 reports to complete before shift change. So why does this all matter? You know, these are just some examples, okay? We've got the Commission on Fire Accreditation International, sponsor of today's webinar. So this isn't this organizational for accreditation, but also they need a lot of data for your personal credentialing too. So again, getting those whys and buy-ins, a good system helps your officers get these credentials, chief fire officer, in addition to your organization getting accredited. Of course, grants, you know, if you don't report to FEMA, you're now eligible for the AFG grants that started back in the early 2000s. And I've heard even back then when I was successful in writing a few grants for my department and a neighboring volunteer department, that even back then they were saying that this was a model of how grants should be executed at the federal government. And I believe that's still the case. Are you missing out? Have you taken advantage of any of these grants? ISO, this is a big impact to the community, right? ISO has the potential to directly affect your customers' insurance rates, okay? What else does that, okay? And it's a metric of your department's performance, but it can directly affect business insurance rates and even some residential insurance rates. And then, of course, everybody here participating today has to manage a budget at some level. Even if you're not, if you're a firefighter, how you care for your gear, how you drive that apparatus, how you put in for training, that all affects the budget. And so the data and putting together this fire data triangle, the software, the hardware, the liveware, and then understanding what good data will help you be successful in all of these different realms. Okay, so Tom's bottom-up theory. So let's take a look at this. And we're going to start at the bottom, and it's going to be a bit of a recap of what we've gone over so far. But we've got good data going in. So is your liveware, are your people trained? Do they know the software that you're using? Okay, do they have the hardware to do it on? And yes, do they know a little bit of the whys behind everything? Okay, and it may not be an elaborate explanation, but at least that's going to create that buy-in that what they're doing at that level, because pretty sure 99.9% of us didn't join the fire service to become data managers. However, even the probationary firefighter manages some element of your agency's data, even if it's just their personal training, their SCBA times while in the academy, the completion of your JPRs. That's all data. And do they know why that all matters? Even if it's just at their level. So if that's the good stuff going in, then the next level is where you're going to get some of those more skilled subject matter experts, knowledgeable people in your organization, those go-to guys that you always say, well, you know, my iPhone, can't get my iPhone to work right. Can you fix it? And they're always there to fix it. They just have those skills. And you coupled with that quality software and hardware, so you can do that analysis. There's so many tools. SIPC offers a lot. There's a lot of off-the-shelf tools for you out there. The previous webinar had one of those, and there's a lot of people that offer these solutions and that you can go to help make your jobs easier. Then we're going to do the good information out. So I like the key word to me here is understood. Okay, yes, trusted, and the trust starts internally. Is it valid data? Is it accurate? Is it consistent? Then how are you communicating it? You may have the same data presented in different ways depending on your audience. You may show it one way to the troops and a whole other way to your city council or your board of directors or commissioners. The key here is, does your audience understand what you're trying to tell them? Is there that ulterior motive? It's perfectly fine. My ulterior motive is to secure X% more funding for my budget next year. My ulterior motive is we need a new apparatus. Here's why we need a new apparatus. I'm documenting this thing's been out of service 30% of the time this year. Hard, cold facts, not just, I think it's been out a few months. We've spent X number of dollars on this one piece of apparatus. This year, it's failing. We need a new one. All right? They're going to ask you these questions. If they're controlling the purse strings, they're going to ask you, well, that's great. You want a new truck, and we love firefighters, but show us why. And that's what I mean by understood. And they don't have time to go through a thesis on analyzing it. They need something that is to their level and something they can make an effective decision on. And here we are, effective decision making. You want safe, well-funded fire departments, the 3 M's, money, manning, and machinery, which leads to those of you participating, happy chiefs. So again, I know this is a lot of high-level conversation here, but if you kind of go back into each one of these and do some introspection on where you're at in your own organization, and then start getting into the weeds with it, you'll find ways, I'm sure you'll find ways to make some improvements within your organization. And it can be a lot of fun, actually, as you start seeing the results. So, as I mentioned earlier, we have some best practice examples, and I'm really honored to bring in some of the people I've met in my travels around the country that I just think are just first-class fire service leaders that, quite frankly, simply get it. And you know, we talked about all of this, but I'd like to have them share their best practice examples so you can see how what they've taken from a presentation like today on what is good data and the fire data triangle and making it work for their organizations. So first, I'd like to introduce Chief Charles McGarvey from the Lower Merion Fire Department in Pennsylvania. His organization is made up of multiple fire companies that comprise the Lower Merion Fire Department. It's got a population of pushing 60,000 and a budget of just over $3.1 million. So Chief McGarvey, what I'd like you to share with them, and this is one of the attachments, is the annual report, and talk a little bit about that process.
Well, thank you, Tom, and welcome everyone. So the annual report to us is key to my office. You know, as we had the downturn with the economy, you know, we saw the slide earlier with the police having all the money and the fire department dug behind. Well, that's very much the case here in Lower Merion. You know, where my budget is 3.1, almost 3.2, and they like to show in the overall budget that 40% of the budget goes to public safety. Well, you can imagine 3.1 isn't that much of that 40%, and so the rest of it goes to the police department. So we're always sitting there, but unfortunately have that view. So what we've been doing is trying to build our annual report to start reflecting the numbers and showing, because we all know pictures are worth 1,000 words, and we were able to built some tables and some pictures to show exactly what we're doing. Lower Merion's a combination fire service. It's mostly volunteer. So we have 7 volunteer fire companies, and then we have the fire department office, which the codes and stuff come out of my office. And I'm the career chief. I've been in this department for 40 years. I've been the career chief for 14. And we've with the software, we've been able to expand our report and show a little more of what each company is doing in their district and outside their district as far as fire calls go, which is showing a better picture to both our community members as well as our board of commissioners as to what's really going on with this fire service. As I said, in the downturn of the economy, I lost my deputy chief and haven't been able to get him back yet. So I'm trying to gather numbers here to show them, they sit there and say, oh, well, 9 fires. Why do you need a deputy chief? And why do we need all this money? And it's not. Well, they forget about all the other calls that, the service calls and the good intent calls, the false alarm calls. I mean, that's been a big issue for us. It's probably half of our calls, 47%. And through getting this information and putting it out to the board, I've been able to get a fire alarm ordinance passed. We're starting to find contractors for false alarms. We're actually starting to find alarm companies who are sending us out and not following the NFPA standard of waiting that 3 minutes and calling to see if it is a true needed emergency or not. So by gathering these numbers, by putting them into this report, showing the pictures, it's helped us a lot to gain some credibility here with our board. We all have that one person that comes to every Board of Commissioners meeting and every committee meeting, and for the first time in my 14 years here, he looked at our annual report and said it was wonderful, and he didn't have one comment on it to tell me there's a spelling issue here, there was this there, but just raved about the information he was able to get from the annual report. So it's important that you get this information together and put it out there to both your constituents, your customers, as well as your commissioners, who are the ones controlling the purse strings.
Chief McGarvey, thank you. Well said, and great examples, especially that one of that one person that always comes to every board meeting, and I remember that well in my department also. So everyone, please take a look. That is attached, the 2017 Lower Merion Annual Report. It's a great document. It's a welcoming document. When I say welcoming, it makes you want to read it and learn about your fire department. So Chief McGarvey, thanks, and I know Melissa had a key role in this too, so we'll do a quick shout out to her as well.
We will do that, and if they want to see compare this to past reports, they can go onto our website, which is www.lowermerion.org, and you'll see. I mean, we gained 11 pages in this report of good, solid information that we put out.
Thanks, Chief. Fantastic. All right, next up, we've got Chief John Greer of Iowa City Fire Department, another true gentleman and a first-class chief. He serves about 76,000 people and has a fire department budget of $8.3 million. And he wants to share something that he did internally with data. So Chief Greer, take it away.
Good morning, Tom. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. Something that we're data geeks here. We've been accredited just recently for the 3rd time. So as you might imagine, we look at data a lot. And something that we were always struggling with was controlling the things that we can as part of the total response time. So we choose to focus on one of the things is turnout times and how we can look at it from all the different perspectives. So we take an opportunity to use our data to look at stations and shifts and companies, and then we put that out on a regular basis for everyone to see, and everybody has an opportunity to look at it so they can see how they compare against everybody else. But part of that struggle that we've gone is how to make sure that they're seeing what we're putting out and how they fit into the equation. So that's something we brought into our quarterly company officers meeting. So that data is really looked at in depth at that meeting, and that's a little bit more of that I guess the pride and the competition of firefighters comes out when you look at how you're comparing to everybody else in the same station or the same apparatus that you're on. So the turnout times that we've been able to decrease has been, I think, directly proportional to how much information we've been able to provide and help explain the why to everybody that works here. I think something that I've heard along the way, I always try to throw Rick Fagan into this thing, that something he said when he was here one time is the facts are the facts. And that's what we report to our folks is these are the facts and how can we impact the facts on our end. We are, I should have said that we are a county-run dispatch center. So while we have influence on the call processing, we do not control it totally. So we look at controlling the things that we can, one of those being turnout times, the other being travel times. So I think it's just something that has helped us to put it out in front of folks. And then we also share this information with the council and the city manager's office and those decision makers to show that we are trying to do our part as well. We understand that it's a total picture of how to make the department better, but we're certainly taking what we can control and trying to improve on that. So yeah, turnout times, we're still working on it, and I'm sure it'll be an ongoing battle, but we're going to keep plugging away.
Chief Greer, thank you very much. And I do find it interesting too that you focused on turnout times because that is something we can really control. Sometimes those travel times, if you start making that too competitive, then you cross the safety barrier, and then people are racing to scenes they don't need to be racing to, and the code 2 versus code 3. So I think that was an element I've heard a lot too. Is okay, let's knock those turnout times down, and yeah, it's seconds, but it's still matters to the customer that you got there 30 seconds a minute faster if you can. So thanks for sharing that, Chief.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right, next up is Bo Hager, no relation to Sammy, and he's the accreditation manager at the Little Rock Fire Department in Arkansas, serving about 200,000 people with a budget of just over 50 million. And Bo has a really interesting one because the call processing times were a challenge for his organization, and due to good data and data management, some significant changes in a relatively short amount of time were able to take place. So I'll let Bo explain.
Hey, good Wednesday to everybody. Thank you, Tom, for having me with you today. I want to talk a little bit about the data collection process here in Little Rock. We were a department that was just plagued with poor documentation for many, many years, leading up to finally going through the accreditation process. And what the accreditation process has done for us has been a culture change in the fire service here, where now our mentality is data-driven decision making. So in January of 2017, the Center for Public Safety Excellence sent a peer team in to review us for our first ever accreditation. And the team that came in were great. They really worked with us. And at the end of their time here, they let us know that, they were really impressed with what they saw with us as a fire department. And at the end of it, we were deferred our accreditation due to a poor communications center. And so that was what we had to tackle in order to move forward and gain that accreditation some 6-7 months later. So we focused, we put all of our effort into that. And at the time, our call processing times were over 5 minutes at the 90th percentile. And that was another culture change in this city. Everybody's used to dealing with averages. And here we come with this percentile number. And there's still people to this day that just don't understand that. But we had to get that 5 minutes or more down. We hold them to a 64-second standard. And one of the things that we couldn't do is we couldn't capture the time that they answered the phone to the time that the event was created in our CAD system. So we had to create that process, and along with many other processes. However, our communications center, like many others, is operated by the police department here. And just like the story around the country, the police department rules the budget here in the city. So we pretty much have no say in how things are governed in that communications center. And up until January of last year, they didn't even know that the fire department had communications standards, period. So we had to go through that fight with them, and we implemented a rapid dispatch procedure with our own tweaks and turns to it that, you know, accommodated our needs. And so we were able to get the times down to 90 seconds or less for call processing. And so that was a very significant improvement for us, and ultimately led to us achieving our accredited status in July of 2017. With all that we went through, we were able to prove the inadequacies with our data in that communications center. So at the time, we were operating over there at a little more than 60% of their authorized strength and staffing. We had times where there was nobody that could operate as a call taker over there, and it got in the news here really bad about our communications center not even answering the phones. So with bringing that data along with the over 5 minutes for the 90th percentile, everything, we were able to increase the salary for our dispatchers to make that job more competitive. They are now at almost 99% of their authorized strength. So that was a big improvement there. And we are currently in the process of replacing our 30-year-old CAD system. And we were able to prove the need there by data. And along with that CAD system, we upgraded our fire station alerting centers system in all 21 of our fire stations to include different tone outs, computer-aided dispatch, automatic dispatching, and then also with information display boards, that shows our firefighters exactly where they're going as soon as the call comes through. So all of that stuff was done by analyzing the call processing and turnout data, and really getting it down to manipulating seconds in those processes. And one of those things that I like to talk about all the time was here in a multi-company station in Little Rock, our tones would go off, and everybody in that station would sit there and wait to see if their unit was called for that response. And the way that our process worked, the units were called last in the dispatch order. So we simply took that, made that the first thing that the dispatcher announced, so that all of our people could get up and start their turnout time. So that is a really big achievement for us I want to share with you all today. I thank you for having me.
Well, that's a great example, and it would be safe to say that you took data and attacked the three sides of the fire data triangle to make a pretty significant improvement. And I know it's ongoing still with the replacement of the CAD, but you had to tackle each side. There was elements of hardware, software, and the people that you had to deal with here and make some serious changes, and you had the data to back that up. How did you, just very briefly, tackling all three sides at once, how did you do it?
It was actually really hard, and I say this to every department that I get a chance to work with now, that one of the most important pieces of data that you could be tracking is what are your members' certification skills and talents. And I'm not talking about fire department skills. I'm talking about what are they mechanics? Are they computer software engineers? Are they carpenters? And find out what their talents are, because there's somebody in your department, regardless of what their rank or position is, much like myself, that can help to move your department forward. And up until this past year, I was a firefighter. I've been in the fire service 16 years, and I caught a lot of problems through the accreditation process for only being a firefighter. But we got to get past that mentality, because it's all about, at the end of the day, the great job that we give to the people that need us.
Yeah, very well said, Bo. Very well said. Thank you. All right, we're at the top of the hour, so we've got to bring this presentation to a close. And if there are any questions, let me take a peek if there are any, and we can answer them as a group. And we'll wait just to, we'll continue on, but if you have any questions, definitely type them in. And in the downloadable handout, you have all of our contact information. And Again, I just want to thank, and I know as we wrap this up, I can't thank Chief McGarvey, Chief Greer, and Bo enough for taking time out of the day to share these examples. I think they highlight the concepts in this presentation in a way that is very meaningful to all of us and shows how the good data management can make significant changes for an organization. I also want to thank everybody at the emergency reporting team that helped me with this presentation. We had a pretty good team. Our marketing team was behind the look and feel of this presentation, as well as the white paper that's attached. They do an amazing job. And also to Cindy and her team at the Center for Public Safety Excellence for having us here today. I consider it very much a privilege and an honor to take part in this. And I'm very grateful to the team that I had with me today. I think the world of Bo and Chief McGarvey and Chief Greer. I'm proud to call them not only co-professionals, but also friends. And just grateful for this opportunity, Cindy. So thank you all very much for taking time out of your busy day to join us.
Thank you, Tom. It was great.
Okay, and let me just make sure there's no questions, and I'm not seeing any. Please download those handouts.
Okay.
There will be a
Tom,
follow-up email. Yeah.
There are a few.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and we'll do this real quickly. If you can stay on to hear them, that'd be great. In figuring out the 90th percentile response times, are you using all incidents, including outliers, like incorrect 24-hour calls?
So that's a good question, and I think the chiefs that are with us can answer how they manage that. But from my gut would tell me that those outliers, you need to be careful with those, and those may require exclusion.
Okay. For the CRA SOC document regarding response times, do you need the maximum high and moderate risk calls?
That I don't know the answer to. Bo, do you know the answer to that one?
I'm sorry, Cindy, what was the question?
For the CRA SOC document regarding response times, do you need the maximum high and moderate risk calls?
Yes, you should analyze all of your risk calls to see how you perform for each one of them.
Okay.
Thanks, Bo.
Let's see.
Thanks, Bo. I thought that might be the answer, but I figured I'd get the Accreditation manager to give us the definitive answer.
What will the new analytical tool going to look? What did I say? What will the new analytical tool going to look like to help us get this data presented in a way that will work?
I'm wondering if you're referring to our system, emergency reporting. You may have caught it. Let me go back real quick. Give me 1 second here. This is a little sneak peek on the right side of what our new analytics will be looking like. It's going to be pretty neat, and you can expect a rollout by the end of the year and then more advanced capabilities in early 2019.
Okay. And if you, Tom, if you could go back to the slide showing your contact information for a second.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this webinar has been recorded. I will be sending Tom and Andrea at Emergency Reporting. Both of them will have access to this recording, the link probably in the next couple of hours. So if you want to email Tom, and he can send you the link. And the slides are here, but you can contact them directly. I will also be sending out a follow-up email from Emergency Reporting probably in the next couple of days with some of this contact information for you to contact them directly for any information.
Yes, please. We encourage you to do that. One of the things as part of our philosophy and mine personally, as well as my company's, is to build that community. And I guarantee you, and I will go out on a limb and speak for Bo, Chief McGarvey, and Chief Greer, that they would be honored for you to reach out to them and for them to share what they're doing in their department so that maybe you can emulate that in yours and take your organization to the next level as well.
Okay. And again, thank you all so much for participating and to our wonderful presenters today. We really, really appreciate it. And we hope to hear from you all soon.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thanks.